We visit the archaeological site. We visit a site in Merseyside, and we look at a site in the Far East, and we look at a site in Greece. So we do some comparison stuff today. I wanted to have a discussion about, we've not burnt out the idea of trees and all the rest of it. And there's been a lot of discussion about how people's relationship was with trees. I just wanted to put a curveball in there. I wanted to put a curveball about wildfires and how that would have affected the landscape. And wildfires is a bit of a double whammy. It kills all the animals, but it wipes out all the trees at the same time. So anyway, I just wanted to chuck that into a little bit of discussion. And I wanted to start off with some oddments, and those are the oddments that I wanted to do some comparison stuff as well. And we funnily enough go to basically between Asia and Australia. We go to New Guinea today. And what I'd like to do is this is an article, and this is dated to June the 9th, 2022. So it's only a few days old, and it's headlines: Prehistoric Wallacea, a melting pot of human genetic ancestries. So that's rather interesting. So it takes us back a little bit to the Paleolithic period, but then again, it really links us in with something new and refreshing. And what I'm going to do is just share the article with us, and I'm just going to read from the article on the screen because it's new. I haven't really digested it. I've had a skim over it, so it'd be something to share, all of us to share now. And I do believe that this is going to be the one that comes up straight away. It's the Greek site. No, so it's not the one that comes up straight away. So we'll look at this one here. That's the wildfire stuff, and there it is. So you couldn't get any more recent than this. Again, the Max Planck Institute, we often come across them. Very interesting. Let's see if we can sort of digest this a little bit more. Prehistoric Wallacea. It sounds like something out of a strange movie, or even sounds like Wales, doesn't it? Prehistoric Wallacea, a melting pot of human genetic ancestries. So it goes to shed light on the archipelago settlement history. Researchers sequenced and analyzed 16 ancient genomes. So obviously we've got those genomes in all of us. It's a signature. The Wallaceian Islands have always been separated from Asia and Oceania, which is Australia, by deep sea waters. Yet those tropical islands, those odd islands between Australia and that sort of that landscape of Indonesia, Malaysia, all that type of stuff, and then you've got the deep waters sort of between Australia and all that. So this is what we're talking about. So these tropical islands were a corridor for modern humans migrating into, it's saying the
Lost you, Carl.
Oh. Oh, what happened there?
Oh, not sure.
Oh, is he trying to get back in again, or shall I give him a call?
You want to call him, are you?
Yeah.
No, he's gone completely.
Yeah.
It's looking kind of like his broadband's dropped out. Oh, wait a minute, we've got two phone numbers here. Yeah, I'll try this one. Ah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk amongst ourselves. See how you get on. No worries. Okay. Good luck. Bye. His power's failed, so he's just going to sort that out. He said it shouldn't be too long. He said.
Oh, that's a shame.
And of course, too long could mean next week, couldn't it?
Well, isn't he powered from a wind turbine?
Yeah, I've no idea how he does it, I'm afraid. But yeah.
Yeah, he said his power's free, isn't it? Because it's
he's got that and a solar panel, I think. And it's certainly sunny here, so he's probably just pulled the plug out.
No wind. So if he's reliant on his wind turbine,
No, I don't think he did.
Isn't he?
He may have a solar panel, but I think he's coupled up to mains electricity, I believe.
Oh, is he?
Oh, is he?
I would think so. If he's on a campsite, then yes.
So he probably just needs to put another 50p in then.
Yeah.
So maybe Baldrick's pecked
Ah.
wire or something. It was loud and clear a minute ago. So
It was.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating. We just got our fiber optic connected up.
Yeah, oh, good.
So
you noticed a huge difference.
Well, no, most people I've spoken to don't seem to have noticed it. I don't think you will see too much difference with your download, even though it says my download speed is now 126 bits per minute.
Yeah,
megabits per minute rather, per second rather, which is massively faster than it was. However, it's more to do with the upload speed for the future because things are going to be much more interactive. And upload speeds are much slower until they get onto this thing. So,
oh well, it's beneficial for Karen with her work, isn't it?
It is, and also it probably means we can watch TV programs in high definition rather than standard definition, and they hopefully won't drop out. So.
Yeah, well, I'm watching high definition because my ordinary one's gone on the blink.
Oh, right.
I can watch on high definition and I can go on iPlayer.
Yeah.
And see things from there. But I think I was hoping that I would win the TV in that raffle prize that they did down at the park. But in the park, they got amazing prizes. Did you see?
No, I didn't see what the prizes were at all. No.
Well, I just went down there today. What did she say? They sold a phenomenal amount, thousands and thousands of pounds worth of raffle tickets.
Oh dear.
Well, it was RNLI, isn't it? So it's a popular cause. So
yeah, I didn't go because it was too windy.
It was all right. It was quite good. There was a lovely atmosphere, but the sound early on was not very good at all.
Yeah.
They sorted it out later on in the evening, but
no, I'm not keen on crowds anymore. I would have loved it a few years ago, but I just can't stand noise and crowds. It's just a sign of getting older, I suppose.
Well, it was relatively quiet until later on. People would just brought their own chairs and were just chatting like they were on the field the other day for the Jubilee party.
Yeah, just
chatting away and joining the games and things.
Yeah. Oh, did you read about that wreck that they found off?
Yeah, wasn't that good? Yeah.
Did
you read when they actually found it?
Well, they found it 5 years ago.
It was like 2007. They found it.
Years ago. Oh, they had a 4,000 year search.
Yeah.
4-year search over 5,000 nautical miles.
Yeah.
Oh, discovered it in 2007.
Yeah. And kept it quiet up till now. They've done well to keep it that quiet.
Yeah, how exciting. They found the ship's bell. That was how they identified it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very lucky find, that actually.
Yeah, flipping that.
Did you see that, Pete? Did you see which one it was?
Yes, I'm trying to remember which one it was now.
I can't remember what it was called. Was it not Sovereign, is it?
The Gloucester.
Gloucester, that's it. Yeah,
Gloucester,
one
that's
that
it, yeah.
one that James the First
Yeah,
and Sixth
that's it.
was on.
Yeah, they said he cost a lot of lives because he wouldn't get off.
Mm.
And because of protocol, nobody was meant to leave the ship before the monarch. So
Possibly.
loads of people drowned.
The problem with the Navy in those days is that most of them couldn't swim anyway. So
yeah, so it's going to be, I've written it down because Carl usually says, have you got any news? I have for once. Asked us this time. They're having an exhibition next year at Norwich Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be really interesting.
Hmm.
Don't think they've decided yet whether they're going to raise it or not, have they?
No, I wonder if it's in the same condition as the Mary Rose.
I think
That's what they were saying, wasn't it?
yeah,
It
I
was
think
the
it probably
similar
will
condition.
be. Yeah, the underwater footage I saw of it had the same sort of like bits sticking out the mud, and it looked like that sort of at least a third of it was missing. So
Yeah.
So it's probably dropped down and fallen onto its side. So it'll be all of one side like the Mary Rose and part of the other side.
Yeah.
The trouble is, once you move it out of the water, then deterioration rapidly sets in.
Yes, it does.
And unless it's properly preserved,
Yeah.
takes some doing.
Yeah, I was astonished that even with cannonballs, solid iron cannonballs, the corrosion gets inside the cannonball, and they have to neutralize that, otherwise it will just disintegrate. Which I didn't realize. I could understand it on the outside, but not actually inside it. Yeah.
But it said they found clothes and shoes, naval equipment, navigational, wine bottles with a glass seal with the crest of the ancestors of George Washington.
Right. Yeah. So from Wharton. We have a little village near us, for those who don't know, called Wharton, which in the church has the coat of arms, the Washington coat of arms, because the Washington family originally were from there.
They're called the Leg family.
The Leg.
It says.
Leg End. Yeah.
Leg Oh, I didn't know there was a link with Wharton. Fancy that.
Yeah. I don't know.
You know, I've had 2 references to that today, and
Really?
I'd never known it before. I was at another meeting early on where that was mentioned. Isn't that strange? Coming in one day.
I can't remember how directly it is. It is fairly. It's the same family. It's fairly close relationship.
Yeah.
Some relative emigrated. So,
Yeah.
Well, most of them were from the UK, weren't they?
Yeah. In the early days, yeah.
There.
UK and France.
Yeah. Brave people that went over there to begin with, flipping out.
Yeah.
Very brave.
A lot of them tried to set up colonies, didn't they? And several of them failed. And they came back.
Yeah.
But, and it wasn't just in North America. Some of them were in South America, on the north coast of South America. There's this famous Scottish one. I can't remember. I saw a program on it, which I didn't know. So I know what I found out today from looking at an illustration. It was a cartoon illustration. I didn't know that a lot of Chinese fought in the First World War on our side, and particularly actually were in the maintenance side of tanks. I never knew even the Chinese were even involved in the First War.
Yeah.
So
a lot of them died coming over. Never mind the fighting. Yeah.
I never even knew they were involved.
Well, there've been a lot of protests because they haven't been recognised.
Yeah,
You know how
well, fair enough.
we award medals and things to people who helped. I think there was some concern over the Chinese complaining that their efforts hadn't been recognised.
Well, this is what that cartoon was about. It was part of the Comic Fest at Kendal there,
Yeah.
The guy I'm doing some work for had seen it in the shop window, and it's got this First World War tank with these 3 Chinese guys working on it. And he's obviously telling a story, and the story in the above all in the clouds are all the Chinese mythical sort of figures and things from their lovely history and things. So it's a really good cartoon, but I never even knew that. Can you think at this day and age you'd know about it?
I think they actually went over to fight. They thought they were going to fight in the war,
right?
Because they were Chinese. They were given menial tasks.
Yeah.
Well, they practically built the railways in America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think they did the same in the war.
I thought Karl was coming back then. There was some strange.
Yeah.
They're doing wonderful things now. The Chinese are sort of a program where they are greening the desert. They've got the Gobi Desert near them. And they've got a system where they're doing cube or all the squares of where they're putting foliage and stuff, which will hold liquid, and planting. And they are, claiming back some of the desert bit by bit. Sounds pretty good work, really.
Yeah.
But that's current. That's today's news rather than.
And they were building a lot of roads over in Africa, weren't they?
Sorry?
Weren't they building recently roads in Africa?
No, no. They've been doing that, what you'd call it, warm politics. It's not that friendly politics or whatever you call it, where they build alliances rather than going with guns. But they've been doing a lot of work, all over the world, I think, which hasn't gone down well with Mr. Trump. At least.
That was Karl just saying that his Samsung phone that he normally uses to run these things, his charger's not working properly, so he's going to try and do it on the iPhone. So he was trying to get in before. He's trying to get back into the meeting now.
Right.
Says 2 people entered the waiting room.
Oh.
Is that Karl and Baldrick?
Has he paid? Yeah.
I don't think so.
Are you host then, Margaret?
Oh, not that I know of.
Where did you see that they've entered the waiting room?
It just says at the top of my screen.
Oh, not on mine.
People entered the room.
Not mine.
Yeah, maybe your host. Just see if you can click on it and see if you have to let them in, because I think it automatically makes somebody host.
I just clicked view and it's disappeared.
Oh.
Speakers gallery. If I press gallery, that's just us, isn't it? No.
I don't know.
Only because I got my Celtic t-shirt on, where's he gone?
Yeah, that's probably what did it, Pete.
Yeah. It probably is.
What you got? The Celtic regions.
Celtic nations, yeah.
Oh, nations. I couldn't quite.
It
folded a bit, so I couldn't quite see what it said. Nations. Oh, that's it. Spread it out, yeah.
Yeah. Come on. It says backgammon and iPhone. Oh, admit. Shall I press admit all?
Yes. If you can. I think you must be a host.
Ah, there we go.
Oh, and there's Pat coming in.
Excellent.
Oh yes, I am the host.
Hi, Pat.
Hello, Pat.
Oh.
We're having an interval at the moment because Karl's power went down. He's
That's what happened. Oh, right. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we decided to let you back in.
Right, yeah, I really appreciate that, Andy. It's a
It took a while to find out who was actually hosting. So we didn't realize. So
I've got my Samsung's not charging, so it's one of these silly phones that it costs a fortune and they don't give you a charger lead. Oh, hang on. It seems to be charging now, which is good. Right, so you can all hear me, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right, that's good.
You're
So,
getting uglier.
right, shut up. So, if somebody could give me, complete control, I'd be very happy. Margaret's the host. Madrina's the host.
So how do I make you?
You make me host, yeah.
How do I do that? Unknown host. That's Drina.
No, that's Drina.
So there's nothing. There's nothing unknown about Drina. And also, have you seen the new actor who's taken on the role of Doctor Who? Well, I have.
I haven't.
Well, I have.
How do I make Carl the host then?
Right, the thing at the bottom, right, if you click on my name, right, it'll say make host.
You're not there. Waiting room participants.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. No, your name isn't here.
That's because it's iPhone.
Invite. Shall I press invite?
No, you've got to press. You've got to press host.
Me. It says I'm the host.
Yeah, but you've got to give me host, otherwise you won't be able to do any of the sharing and stuff.
Oh, rename. Hang on. Rename. Rename. So if I just put your name in here.
Actually, weirdly enough, my other phone's coming back on now, so I can do it myself.
Are you just there as Carl? Or do
No,
you...
I'm there as iPhone.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Oh, you nearly swore then. I nearly got an F out you. I nearly did.
No, I've made myself into iPhone now.
Oh my God. Right, all right, guys. All right, I'm gonna take charge, right? Basically, what this is, right? It's suddenly the Africa Corps taking over North Africa. I'm taking over from the Italians, right? And there you go. Mind you, it's a great myth about the Italians. The Italians were the ones who actually held back the British while the Germans retreated. Oh my God! Oh God, wrong. All right. Like if I go. Is that? Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Do you know what? Right. We were talking about. We did. You know, when I went into doing the class, then it all went wrong because we didn't do any news of the week. Well, we didn't ask anyone who got any news of the week, and I just sort of said, well, bit disappointed that Idris Elba didn't get the part of Doctor Who, but a chap from Africa has taken over the role of Doctor Who, and I've acted with him. Unfortunately, his experience of me is that I give him a big sloppy kiss on his lips. I am not joking. I got a bit excited one day and I gave him a big sloppy kiss. And I said to him that day, you're going to go a long way, mate. And he's ended up as Doctor Who. Right. Pete, any news from you this week? We didn't do the news bit. Go for it.
No, I got my lovely Celtic t-shirt on, especially for you.
I could sing there, especially for you. You know what I was going through. Sorry, Kylie Minogue, last neighbours. Drina.
No news. No.
Do you know, Drina, you look very fiery tonight. It's almost as if I could. No, let's just move on. Talking about whipping, how do you carry on in life? All Right, I'm not going to trouble. I'm not going to trouble Dave because Dave doesn't seem to be in a good place tonight. So I will not pick on Dave. But Dave, hopefully you'll get well soon. I didn't like the sounds of that. Right, Margaret.
Well, we were just talking when you went. We were saying that we'd seen about the shipwreck that's been discovered off Great Yarmouth, the Gloucester. The HMS Gloucester, discovered 28 miles off Great Yarmouth.
Yeah.
It was discovered in 2007, but it's only just been proven to be that they found the ship's bell. They had to make sure that it was that ship. And it went down in 1682 on the 6th of May. And it
Right, give me an important fact. Which king was involved with the wreck?
It was James Stewart, James the
Correct.
Second.
You are correct, and that's what makes it stand out. It really does. And to be honest with you, yeah, something like that deserves to be lifted because it is linked with the king and Henry VIII's ship, and whereas Henry VIII's Mary Rose in was it 1547, he wasn't actually on board that, but King James was actually on board this one when it was going down.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. Andy. Andy, any news from you?
No,
darling?
but I was just thinking, didn't King James's wife get wrecked as well on the way from Denmark or somewhere? And he suspected foul play, and it caused a lot of political problems.
Well, the problem is with that being foul play, Andy. Right? They should not have taken on the geese and the ducks on board the ship.
Right? Yeah. Good. Yeah.
No, it said they were picking her up from Scotland. She was pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah, but I seem to remember there's some story about her coming across because this is how he got involved in the witchcraft stuff. Because he suspected foul play because somebody was supposed to have put a curse on and created the storm that wrecked her ship. So
yeah.
Well, Andy, you could certainly update us on that next week.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that'd be really good. That'd be really good.
But no to the rest.
Don't know. Pat, any news from you, darling?
No, I read things on my phone every so often and then I forget and then it disappears. So I can't remember it and it's gone. So, sorry about that.
Oh, don't worry, guys. Right. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, I am up against trying to charge this phone while I'm using it, and the biggest problem is I'm just trying to make sure that we've got enough power. So I was describing earlier on about this archaeology that's been brought to us from this long lost world, or a world that's with us today. It's just those islands. And one of the things, the Wallaceian Islands, as it's described, are tropical islands, corridors for going back and forth to Australia, New Guinea, and Asia. And they've been talking about the archaeological record. The tests proves a major cultural transition across Wallachia. Sometime around 3,500 years ago, which isn't too far long ago. But what they're saying is that they can trace different movements of people over a long period of time, and they're also talking about this amazing word, intermixing, interbreeding. And they're thinking that when they've analyzed the DNA going back to 47,000 years ago. So as I said, you've got this movement 3,500 years ago to Australia, and there's this idea that's the sort of movement sort of across those islands to Australia and back to sort of Indonesia and Malaysia. All that stuff has been going on for a long, long time. And what they're saying is that lots of the people within that region are just sort of interlinked, massively interlinked. And they're saying that that they've got movements of farmers over a long period of time, traveling long distances. And they're starting to look at cave evidence. And the identity of these people is slowly starting to come into the mix. And I think the one thing about all this research with Australia and Asia and the islands themselves is that they're now starting to believe that the people of all at some time have mixed and moved, and there's a huge sort of connectedness with all these human populations rather than isolated human populations. So this is what this new research is talking about that's come out on the 9th of June 2022. I won't do any more about that, but what I'm going to say is that one of the things that we are looking at in archaeology is this intermixing of humans and DNA, and that's something that we very much came across when we're looking at Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, Denisovians, and there's been a new Denisovian find made very, very recently, which is also on the internet, which I haven't actually been able to digest myself. Which is a bit of a shame, but what we do have is maybe something in that direction next. So I'm gonna give, as I say, this is all new stuff to me. So I'm gonna see if I can try and use my screen. Hopefully, power will be okay. And if we go with this. And why have I got Johnny Depp coming up on the screen? Hang on a minute. I just got to see what's happened. Oh, right, hang on. Stuff on here that I didn't even know. Right. So if I just type in something, because I've come off the internet and the phones. Oh, there we go. That's what I wanted. I came across this really interesting. 8 days ago, this was placed online. And this is sort of from our Mesolithic period, and sort of that interlinking. And I would like to mention, if you do get an opportunity to look at the new Denisovian find, please do. So what they've got, this again is really, really fresh, dating from the 7th of June 2022, and it goes the face of Aggie, Aggie, the 9,000-year-old teen from Mesolithic Greece. Now, you know, the Mesolithic Greece was a very, very different place than the world that our Mesolithic people occupied in Great Britain. And there's a reconstruction of this individual's face. And again, this sort of reconstruction. Hang on. This reconstruction of people's faces is nothing new, but obviously, for some reason, there's something flashing up on the screen which I don't seem to be able to get rid of at this minute. And again, a 9,000-year-old teen, a reconstruction from Mesolithic Greece, and it goes on to say the reconstructed face of Aggie, a teenager who lived in Mesolithic Greece, and dating to 7,000 years BC. 9,000 years ago. Through modeling the face of the young girl, scientists have allowed the public to look into the eyes of a person who walked the earth 9,000 years ago. And one of the things I think that we're trying to do in archaeology now is really make archaeology more and more relevant. Facial reconstructions are, in fact, allowing us to maybe understand our ancestors a lot more, instead of just bones and instead of bits of pottery and instead of bits of old rotten timber. By reconstructing these faces, you start to get some kind of connection with these people from the past a little bit better. I'll give you, I'll give you a really weird example. I was in a petrol station last night, and there was a guy behind the counter. And he looked very similar to my granddad, Bill. that Peter knew. And I hadn't seen my granddad since my granddad passed away in 1993 or 1994, I think it was. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is by having people's faces in front of you are reminders of your memories. And by looking at an image like this, a reconstruction of somebody from Mesolithic Greece is reminding you that these people were like you and I. And it makes them very, very relevant. Their loves and fears and aspirations are not too different from our own today. Some of our major aspirations today are to survive and live and breathe like these people in the past, to work, to get things from the shop, to be able to support our families. All these things are what these people actually felt. So reconstruction of a face like this is sort of giving you an idea of the daily life in the Mesolithic period. And this is rather interesting. A reason I wanted to somehow, when we're looking at the Paleolithic period and the Mesolithic period, I wanted us to somehow be reminded of the differences. And in Europe, the Mesolithic period lasted from, if you add 2 onto that, 17,000 years ago to 7,000 years ago. So 5,000 years BC, 7,000 years ago, and 15,000 years BC, 17,000 years ago. And you'll note that their Mesolithic period begins before ours and is a lot longer than our Mesolithic period. And what we can say about Greece is one of those transitional zones where new technology seems to be dispersed from. We get the idea of pottery and ceramics and textiles and agriculture and animal husbandry sort of being dispersed from places like Greece. But we have established in our lectures as well that we don't really need to have people dispersing the skills of being able to look after animals or make pottery. But it's an interesting idea that some of the ideas may have come to us rather than the specifics of being diffused from a place. I like to determine our ancestors' path in history from our landscape and everything that's around us. So it's basically saying, very interesting, something that I've been saying. In some areas, Greece, there are remnants of pottery, ceramics, and textiles in Mesolithic culture. Now, this is really interesting. This is something that I've been saying. Very interesting that what I've been saying is that you don't suddenly wake up in the Neolithic period and you get pottery, textiles, and everything else, right? Pottery, textiles, and all these other things are being developed in the idea of the Mesolithic period, the Mesolithic culture. And then things sort of come of age in the Neolithic period. I liken that they've come to the same conclusion that I come to. So we're also thinking about, in this period, again, settlements, the cultivation of the land using agriculture, sort of spewing in from the Mesolithic into the Neolithic period. Everything is in transition. I think it's also interesting that we see archaeology, and again with this article it's saying Avgi's remains found in 1993 from the Opetra cave in Greece. And very interesting that we've got the name there, Avgi, which means dawn in Greece, marks the dawn of civilization in Greece. When we think about that, it's a big weight to put on anyone's shoulders to be the archetypal Greek person. But anybody can be said to be that sort of sense of humanity, emboldened humanity. A little bit about the cave there. According to archaeologists, the cave is likely to be the place of the oldest human construction on Earth, as findings indicate that the shelter was inhabited as early as 130,000 years ago. Now, I like this little fact that we've got in front of us here. And like that fact, that's really chucked it at us, hasn't it? It's saying about the cave itself being created in the Cretaceous period, 137.65 million years ago, in that period of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous. And very interesting there, a shelter, evidence of a human shelter within the cave, some kind of building dating back to 130,000 years ago. Again, that's rather interesting, because I do argue that people were living and having homes and sort of having a settled way of life, instead of them being always interpreted as being hunter-gatherers. We've already mentioned this as well. You could be a hunter-gatherer, but you can be living somewhere as a permanent dwelling. And again, thinking about other places in the Mesolithic period is nothing different from what we've been saying. Is this another reconstruction? Hang on a minute. Here we go. There she is. Type of woman that you wouldn't mess around with in the street. And again, this idea of reconstruction, this idea of analysing bones, 15-year-old, dental tests showed that she may have been 18. So thought to be 15, 18 years old. Again, looking at this sort of one individual, getting an idea from Greece as well. What were they what were they eating? What was their diet like? She had evidence that she may have had anemic, lacking sort of iron, and suffering from vitamin deficiencies. Did that lead to a death? And again, thinking about this, and interestingly, Avgi is the second creation of this Manolis Papagrigarakis, associate professor at Athens Archaeology, following the 2010 reconstruction of the face of Myrtis, an 11-year-old girl who died from typhoid sometime around 400 years BC. Again, getting an idea of these people looking directly into their eyes, this effort to reconstruct these faces from skull remains and teeth, and getting sort of an idea of facial perspectives from the archaeology. So what we're going to move on now, and I would like to bring us back home. Again, I did say that I would be looking at other sites from the world of archaeology, and that's what we've done now. So what I'd like to do is, when I was planning this today, I was meant to be looking at a site called Redicon Dean in Yorkshire, which we'll be doing after the break. But I wanted in mention, I don't know if we mentioned this last week, there's a site known as the Lunt Meadows Archaeological Site. And it was sort of, I wanted to do something a little bit nearby, a little bit near you guys, sort of a little bit of a read, a little bit of information. And again, the Lunt Meadows Mesolithic settlement. This article here dates back to 2012. I think I might be able to get something up on the screen. I'm not exactly sure. Everything's gone a little bit skew-whiff, and let's just see. Oh, right, yeah, we had an image of this is that cave that we were talking about, Australia, with their excavations there. Yes, that sort of transitional evolutionary piece that we mentioned, Wallachia, earlier on. So if we go with this, and we think about the Lunt Meadows site, and it's a seaward site, and also trying to get this image up. Where's that image? Let's just add it. There we go. That's a little bit of a backdrop. So, Lunt Meadows, Mesolithic settlement, and Lunt Meadows itself. We'll give you a bit of a description of where that is in a few moments. It's along the coast, Merseyside, and the thing is about this site, we've even got footprints. And when one of the things that we do in archaeology a lot is that we make a find and we say that this is the most important archaeology ever discovered. And we sometimes say that this piece of archaeology will change our understanding of certain periods in time. And Lent Meadows is no exception to that. And I think when archaeologists are out there and we're thinking of, we find something, everything's important, everything takes us a little step further forward. Everything that we do find in archaeology is another bit of the jigsaw. No matter how mundane and small it sounds, is very important. When we were looking at the Paleolithic period, one of the things that I was keenly aware was that we would infer and understand wonderful things from very small bits of archaeological evidence. And again, this is no exception. Nothing in archaeology is an exception. We're never going to get the full picture of everything that's happened in archaeology. So from this site, and it's also very near the sea as well, archaeologists analyze the stone tools from the site, as well as the layers of soil from which the tools were extracted. The results show that the remains are around 8,000 years old at the end of our Mesolithic period. And this was an age when humans lived in small bands. The bands would move from camp to camp with changing seasons. Now, it's rather interesting that they say that, because last week we were talking about Hawick, and we were thinking about the shell sites at Ronsay, and we've mentioned Starkar a few times. And this idea that people may have lived in localities for long periods of time, or some people may have moved around a bit and so on. We discussed all that. There's lots to be said from the likes of this site. And when we look at Starkar in a few weeks' time, the idea that people living on the coast in the winter months and living further inland in the summer months is not something that I would aspire to. But there are merits in both theories. But we also mentioned against this when we looked at Aronsay that limpets were being collected all year round. So they were at that same locality all year round. And Hawick gave a similar idea to that. So again, it's about not being obsessed within a coat and a jacket, with that everything in the Mesolithic period has to be the same. Like today, people live in various different ways. If you live in a flat, or you might live in a house, or you might live in a caravan, or you might live in the back of a van. But there's no real formula for the Mesolithic period. All we can say is that people did live in this country, and we've got the archaeological evidence for it. And we think about today as it was back then, making the best use of their lifestyle. 8,000 years ago, on the western coast of Britain, Merseyside, are we thinking that these people needed to move around? What was life like? Had they cut down many trees? Was it foggy? What's going on? And at the Lunt site as well, Lunt, at the Lunt site, they've actually found evidence of houses, temporary houses, small buildings. And there's one interesting thing, where they were looking for the archaeological site, for the archaeology. They eventually come up with a building that was 6 meters across. Now, excuse me if I may mention this, that the building, the last building that was occupied at Hawick was 6 meters across, was 6 meters in diameter. Building here was also 6 meters in diameter. And they not only found one building, they found several buildings at this locality, leaving a series of post holes that are now differentiated from the sand. So, it's one of the points with this site that they started excavating in 2012 was that the archaeologist that was doing the work was surprised that they had actually found evidence of buildings that showed that they lived there rather than moving around all the time. They were surprised. Nothing surprises me in archaeology. Why shouldn't they have been living in one spot? So when we sort of dig in and to sort of try to understand what's going on with all of this, so the Lunt Meadows archaeological site is hugely exciting. Like all archaeology is hugely exciting, and it gives a new label and a new palimpsest, a new sort of set of information to sort of rewrite the history of the area. And when we think about Merseyside, it's not far away from, it's further away from South Wales, but it's much closer to Cumbria. And it's so interesting that we're starting to understand this landscape. And they're saying nearby in dunes along the Sefton coast, they found, it's going to be 30 years ago, they actually found some footprints, Mesolithic footprints. We've mentioned footprints before, have we not? But these were actually Mesolithic footprints in the muds covered by the sand dunes at Sefton. So these footprints were not all that far from Lunt Meadows and are preserved in the layers of muddy sand. The footprints are unique as they show the immediate effects on the landscape which people made merely by inhabiting it. A footprint, it might be somebody's just a footprint wandered across the landscape. But when we think about footprints, it's like that reconstructed image of Aggie that we saw from Greece, that Mesolithic teenager. And we think, well, footprints themselves give you so much information that a set of skeletal remains can't give you. Footprint might tell you how tall the individual was. A footprint might tell you whether they're male or female. Footprint might tell you whether they were carrying something, all these different things, which you're not necessarily going to get from excavating human remains. So, and again, this is something that we do see, very, very familiar story of a set of children's footprints next to an adult's. Clearly, did they walk hand in hand along the muddy, sandy landscape to preserve their footprints? And again, it's saying that what we do know is that the coastline would have been much further out, particularly at sort of high tide mark more than anything. But because the landscape was slowly becoming sort of inundated with sands and silts and so on, the footprints were actually preserved. And we're always curious when we see footprints, what do footprints mean? And this is the thing, we know the footprints were made. We know they were created. We know who created them. But I think sometimes we as archaeologists really try to push it a bit more. Were they hunting? Well, probably not. Were they out gathering food? Well, you might be able to work out if they were gathering food, or they'd gathered it because there was more weight on the footprints. So they're obviously carrying something. There's obviously not that evidence, or they're out for a straw. Now, this is rather interesting. This is very, very interesting, and this is something that we don't talk about. I mentioned the word, these people were going out for a stroll. Well, why shouldn't they? One thing that we think about with the past is that we make it incredibly complicated. But we always say, they were always working and they were always in some kind of activity, right? And I would subscribe to that in many ways, but I would also subscribe to the fact that these people may have gone for walks with their children. They may have had relationships with people, and you're thinking, well, this makes it even more real. Why should we one of the things that we discount with people in the past is their humanity. They were human like us. Again, they had lives, and why shouldn't, and when we see the mundane, sometimes it's the illuminating nature of the evidence that we find. So again, given a clearer picture of this landscape, and one thing this article does say to me is that, and I think again we'll stress what we said last week, when we see people living in one area, it's a sign that they've got everything to hand. The resources that are around them, this rich environment has provided everything they need so they can live in one spot. The resources in my notes were close at hand. And again, we think about estuaries where the non-saline water meets the saline water, this time going out into the Irish Sea. And we think very much from the evidence at sites such as these, where we find evidence of fish and shellfish, but don't forget, we have shellfish living in some freshwater rivers as well, freshwater mussels. And they are thinking from the archaeological evidence, again, at Lunt, that the river channels, as we've said, gave easier access inland, while the rest of the landscape might be blanketed in woodland. Woodland, however, provided other sources of food in the form of nuts. I don't know if we gave that fact out a few weeks ago, but I think somebody said out of a mature oak tree you can get a ton of nuts. So incredibly, there's a large amount of food to be obtained by these trees, but we've also mentioned about the dangers of these woodlands. And in amongst this landscape would have been boar and deer in amongst the woodland, the sophisticated tools. And they're saying Wales isn't far away. That's some Welsh chert, some Welsh sort of, it's like a sedimentary sort of flint type material chert, which can be made into tools. And the other thing as well is they're talking about by the shoreline very near this sort of marshy area on the screen. They it's the idea that lots of this chert is actually being washed up as well. So sort of understanding this past, understanding a sense of connectedness is very much where we're talking about. And do you know what I'd like to do? There's a nice little bit of other information here that we're going to do from the Lunt site. And it would be very, very interesting to do this. So here we go. So the site that we're talking about is that, that we're thinking very much that this site may have been one of the early domesticated sort of farm-like sites within the landscape. And the evidence that has been excavated at this site is evidence of auroch, the old cattle, beaver, we never come across them usually, pine marten, wolves, and moose, elk. And this is the thing, you see. Don't always think because we've got bones of these animals on an archaeological site that they're actually eating pine marten or beaver or wolf and so and so. It's just that that's the archaeological evidence that we've got. But it's sort of presuming that some of the evidence that we're finding associated with beaver and pine marten might indicate that the fur itself from both beaver and the pine marten is something that they would have worn. And they're talking as well about shells with perforations on them. Were they associated with clothing? Don't know. So inevitably, these people that lived within this landscape from the archaeological evidence were very similar to the reconstruction of Cheddar Man. And when we looked at the Cheddar Man evidence, and that showed somebody as having dark skin and dark hair and blue eyes. But then again, fair enough. And again, this is a very important point, and this is a very, very well written point that the person's used for this lens site. And again, this is something that I said last week. The people lived in houses and not the caves of popular perception. Yes, they would have lived in sort of caves and rock shelters, but we do get lots of evidence that people did actually live in houses in Mesolithic Britain. And we're really starting to come across this. And we're thinking that we would have had a wooden frame, a wooden structure with maybe a reed floor, roofs, as we mentioned, with the Hoyk site, sods of earth and reed. And we're again thinking that maybe up to 3 buildings at this lunch site, the biggest one being 6 meters. And again, this is really telling us that something very important is going on. And again, it's sort of telling me as well something else that I say. This is a really, really good piece. And it sort of agrees with lots of things I say. If you're going to go after wild animals, you've got to be very skilled to deal with them, particularly if you're going into those woods. And what they've come across is lots of projectiles, such as microliths. And they're saying these microliths are so numerous, and we're starting to find evidence of scrapers, axes, owls, augers that can make holes in leather. And what we are actually starting to think of is that people in the past may have had lots more innovations than we give them credit for. And what we mean by that, again, this writer is also saying this. He's saying that just because you don't have the evidence for plates and cups and furniture, it doesn't mean to say that they didn't have them. And again, that's a really interesting one. We in this modern day and age, we stopped using wooden bowls and wooden spoons, but we used to. And so if there was no evidence of wooden bowls and wooden spoons, does it mean to say that we never ate out of wooden bowls and use wooden spoons? Wooden spoons are starting to come back. I mean, when you go into the BBC canteen, for example, everything's wooden forks, wooden everything, right? And this is the thing, you see. So as we're using these things today, it doesn't mean to say that they weren't comfortable. There's this sort of old idea of the past that people sort of lived in hovels and didn't have a comfortable life. They could have had a comfortable life quite easily. And in some cases, other than our Aggie, lots of them had good diets. Some didn't have good diets. And there's evidence of one woman being found at this site, that the woman was is describing her as being so fit that she could have been an Olympic rower. Her bone density was similar to that of an Olympic rower, and I think that's absolutely amazing. Again, when I say that that's absolutely amazing, again, it's saying everything that I said, that everybody in the past was very much into this sort of sense of equality. And again, before we sort of go on to having a break, and I have really sort of gone over, but it doesn't matter. They're saying across this landscape, we've got not only the best evidence of a settlement, that they've got a very early cemetery at the site as well, and they also describe the cemetery, this Mesolithic cemetery, that there's evidence to say that they properly cared for their dead. They buried them. Burials, and they say that there's this idea of people being buried, the idea of people being cremated. They've been reburied sometimes again, and we're thinking of burying their loved ones with various goods that they could take with them in the afterlife or sort of remember. The dead were often buried with tools in much the same way as might like to take their treasured possessions. I sometimes feel when we're looking at this, then they might take their second best, and the living keeps the good stuff. I don't know. It's just being me being cynical. But when you look at something like a Sutton Hoo, that it's almost as if the bad stuff was buried with the individual at Sutton Hoo. We don't know. Anyway, back to this Mesolithic period. Of often finding jewelry and other bones and antlers, and red ochre seems to be a common theme throughout history. When we looked at several caves on the Gower in the Paleolithic period, had lots of red ochre in them, and they could say that red ochre sort of brings life to a body, and it's talking about lots of connections with the site at Starcar. And again, sorry, we haven't got any images on this site other than the sort of backdrop. And we might look at another site called Aveline's Hole. So that'd be a good one. So it looks like the people living here were conscious and self-aware. It's saying they're even sort of seeing that they had a great sort of respect for the landscape and a great negotiation with the landscape. And we're thinking that, again, if we should ever come back to this site, Merseyside, again, it's providing a new idea. It's the Lunt Meadows settlement on Merseyside. So if we sort of look and we type in Lunt Meadows, we get a location. Lunt Meadows. We type in location, so we know where we are. Location. There we go. How are we going to do this? Okay, map. So we can get an idea where this site is precisely. Okay. So I think we've got the inland site. Hang on. I think it's quite a big site. There we go. There we go. So what they're saying is that this sort of entire landscape from there all the way to the sea is sort of the huge Lunt Meadow site with sort of a great resource. I've got a really nice image on the phone where they've got a beach here. So it's the Lunt Meadow site, and it's near. It's north of Liverpool, west of Manchester, south of Blackpool, and not too far away from Wales. You can imagine that lots of the stuff that's being eroded into the sea, like flint nodules and sort of some of the Welsh chert, is going to be sort of washed up on the shoreline and used for this site. So I wanted to sort of do the Lunt Meadow site with you today. And what we're going to do now, I'm glad we managed to get the technology working. So, right, is there any questions?
Yeah, Carl, the very near to that site, Formby, that was on that map, which is on the coast, they found Mesolithic footprints in the layers of mud, and quite a lot of other places north of there, of things like people and red deer, oryx, wild boar. What else did they find? Something else. But, and 2012. So if you want to just look up Formby footprints, it'll come up with that as well.
Oh, there we go, Formby.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we certainly will. The one thing about looking at this Mesolithic stuff is to sort of keep adding stuff to it. So we'll be looking at Aveline Hole, and we'll come to Formby footprints again. So yeah, thanks for that. That's added to the list. Right. Any other questions?
I haven't got a question, but I used to drive along that road next to the place when I went to work.
Oh, right. So you had good views of the sea.
Sorry?
You had good views of the sea then.
Yeah.
Well, that's where Idris got his inspiration from, wasn't it? In your car ride. Okay, thanks for that. Who else have we got? Dave. Oh, should we ask David? David, anything you want to say quick?
Okay.
Okay. Let's not pick on Dave too much. Peter.
No, fine, thanks.
Okay. And who else have we got now? Pat, anything you'd like to say, darling?
No, it's interesting. Very interesting.
Something new. Anne?
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting. People seeing the reconstructions really brought them to life in a way. You almost felt you would meet them, and it really brought them to life, didn't it? A wonderful way of presenting, I think, the reconstructions.
Yeah, I'm sorry we don't have. I'm very aware of the my power tonight, so I've just died back on the images a little bit. But obviously we'll have a little bit more next week. Yeah. So yes, it's trying to give some meat to the bones. Yes.
Yes.
Margaret.
Well, I've been reading, or I saw a film. It was somebody called David Jacques from the University of Buckingham. I think he did a time team thing at Blicksmead.
Oh, the Blicksmead excavations. Yes, that was time team. Yeah.
Interesting. They found, they were very excited because they found the remains of a hunting dog, which had come from quite some way away. So they said it must have been accompanied by humans. And they found it's quite a magical place, this apparently.
Blicksmead, yes.
Algae there that turned pink. And they found cooked frog's legs, toad's legs, and lots of auroch footprints. And he actually said that eating fish was taboo in the Neolithic period, which I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna struggle with that because I will tell you why it was taboo in the medieval period, because they thought that fish out at sea were contained the souls of the departed, and actually they say that fish out at sea have nibbled at the dead, and it was unacceptable to eat fish out at sea. But I tell you what, right, that's just a superstition, and it's not going to stop a fisherman going out getting a huge bass.
Mm.
Did I ever tell you about that fishing competition I entered, Margaret?
No.
No, this is a true story, right? I entered a fishing competition. It was the first and last one I ever entered, right? I was down on Porthkerry Beach in Barry, right? And I was just about to is it cast in? I can't really remember what the terms is. On the end of my line was this huge bass, right?
Mm-hmm.
This massive bass fish. I thought, oh my God, I would have won the competition, right? Anyway, somehow it managed to wiggle off the hook. 10 minutes later, this other guy cast it in, right? And he won the bloody competition with my fish. And that's my story. The fish had got away, and it was my fish. Never forgive me for that. It was my fish, no one else's.
Perhaps he'd got a better hook than you, or something.
Oh yeah, it really makes me feel good. Thanks a lot. You know,
well, he might have had.
Yeah,
what tree throws are. I keep coming across on these Mesolithic sites that they found tree throws. What the heck are those?
Say it to me. Tree what?
Tree throws. THROWS.
Throws.
THROWS.
Tree throws.
Well, I tell you what. Whilst we're on you, right, we're going to look it up. Because I've never heard of that either. So we're going to look it up now, darling. So see, Mesolithic tree throws.
Throws.
Mesolithic tree
Throw.
throws.
Yeah. This is at the Stainton West near Carlisle. They found tree throws, hearths, stake-hole structures, which indicate a contemporary settlement.
Right, here we go. We're going to do this. Okay. All right. We're going to do this. Okay, here we go. The tree throw found next to the Mesolithic post holes at Stonehenge have been thought to not only predate the post holes, but to be the reason the post holes were erected. Considering that this tree throw is the beginning of the ritual landscape, we know today since Blick Mead has been found 2 kilometers away and has shown a significant Mesolithic occupational landscape, is evidence that the tree throws were an important marker in the Mesolithic Stonehenge landscape. So we'll do that again, but it still doesn't answer what a tree throw is.
No.
So what is a tree throw? Here we go. A tree throw or tree hole is a bowl-shaped cavity or depression created in the subsoil by a tree. They are formed either by the long-term presence and growth of tree roots, or when a large tree is blown over or has its stump pulled out, which tears out a quantity of soil along with the roots. And you know what? I've definitely learned something today. Thank you very much for that.
Call it a bowl, wouldn't we? When a tree is at root
Throw.
storm, don't we call it the bowl?
Well, whatever we call it, it's a tree throw in this one.
No, that's a root ball you're thinking of.
Yeah. Root ball. Well, that's the same thing then, isn't it?
No, that's the bit that comes out the ground. That's part of the tree. The hole it leaves behind is the throw.
The tree throw. Had you heard of that, Andy, then?
No, I didn't know that one at all either. It's new on me.
Well,
I think I'm making it up.
You're making it up as you go along.
I only know throws as being like a shawl. Why would they be throwing shawls over the trees back then?
Well, you never know.
You never know. Right. What was I going to say? I don't know what I was going to say now. Yeah, cool. Right, that's it now for questions, isn't it? Thanks. I think. Anyway, we'll be back in a rolling mo.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I got, yeah. Drina, right, Drina. Right, I'm gonna. So I'm struggling with the name of the new Doctor Who. Hang on, it's here we go. We got to do this, Drina. Doctor Who. 14th. He's the 14th Doctor Who. Here we go, and he's called. I need to write this down because I can't get it right. Right, here we go. How do you say this? His name is Ncutigatwa. Kuti Gatwa. And he definitely looks the part. So yeah, he definitely looks the part. Yeah, my ex-wife. It was my children and my ex-wife yesterday. She said, "Oh, I went off Doctor Who." She said, when Matt Smith became Doctor Who because it looked too much like your dad.
Oh, I thought he was good.
Yeah, she didn't like it because he looked like me. In fact, that's the reason why I got into acting. Because I told you this, didn't I? I used to sign people's magazines and books because they thought I looked like Matt Smith. And I signed the back of somebody's brand new iPhone and with a black marker, and it sank into the plastic in the back of the phone. So right, let's have a let's just try and come back about 5 past or something, maybe a bit longer. Right, okay. Anyway, I'm gonna Pete, why didn't you sing to everyone? Do him a poem, Pete.
I can do a poem. I can have my life in verse. My life in verse. There we are. Born in Cornwall, proud to be, taken to London with my family. War broke out, not safe to be. became a very young evacuee. Back to Cornwall, to Auntie Lizzie, to live away from my family. Had a great life in the countryside, met my family only at St. Peter's Tide. Life in my boyhood years, fun friends, maybe a few tears. Always after school, jobs to be done, once completed, time for fun. Weekend task, clean out the chickens. Evening time, okay to read Dickens. Sunday best for Sunday school, tease the girls and play the fool. 11 plus exam to pass. If successful, off to the class. In grammar school, lots to learn. So at later, a living to earn. Move back to mum and dad, still just a teenage lad. Work with dad in the catering trade. Winter gardens, sandwich to be made. Deciding for life on the sea, travel the world and sights to see. Went to Falmouth, Shipping Federation. Sent to doctor for medical examination. Ship's officer was my interest. But sadly failed the eyesight test. So a job on deck was not to be. The need for specs ruled it out for me. Catering staff was second best. Cooking, cleaning for all the rest. Off to sea school to learn the trade. T.S. Vindicatrix tracks I made. Selected to lead a 4-man team, boys my age, some a bit mean. Jobs to be done aboard the ship, cleaning, tidying, no mess to skip. Back to Falmouth to join the pool. Signing on the ship was the rule. Oil tankers were common in the dock, sent for repair in the dry dock. First one I joined was owned by BP. Off to the open sea was a joy for me. Persian Gulf, first port of call. Suez Canal seemed very small. Down the Red Sea, then to load oil. Back to Europe to offload the spoil. 9 months at a time away at sea. Back home for a few weeks leave for me. After several more such trips in a variety of ships, with the Suez Canal now closed, much longer trip home was proposed. From the Gulf around the Cape, at least 2 months it did take. Lands then for orders was a message sent. You're headed for dry dock, they meant. 9 months trip had finally ended. Ship must go to Barry to be mended. Dry dock in port, the intention. Things to mend, too many to mention. Barry, well-known seaside resort. 3 young boys, first time in port. Work finished for the day, off to the fair, time for play. 3 boys looking in the arcade with what songs on the jukebox to be played. The girls said what would be best. Boys agreed and forget the rest. Boys and girls continued to chat, talking together of this and that. Boys and girls became 3 pairs. Time to go, enough affairs. Offers to walk girls home agreed, save to the ladies, the ultimate need. Walk to the home at the top of the street, making arrangements of a game to meet. Me and Lorna agreed to write while away. Writing continues for many a day. Meeting at leave time over the years, leaving to go back to sea brings on the tears. Proposal accepted, decided to marry. Next time leave, no time to tarry. Man and wife, we'd sworn to be. Sadly, I still had to go to sea. Training was needed. Hang on, not that one. Not to travel the seas anymore. Now ashore, a living to earn his top aim. Firing a coal boiler is work all the same. Other jobs and better are there to be found. All it needed was to look around. Silicone production looked a good bet. Ideal, well-paid job to get. P&PD was the plant I started and was there till me and silicone parted. First child now on the way. Daughter Cheryl has made our day. Distillers company seemed too good to be true. Joined the yard gang, maybe to rue. Plastics the future looked sound. Started in winter, snow on the ground. Emergency team needed, selected me to lead. Winter got warmer, team now not the need. At various jobs in the production of PVC. Selected again to lead with BP. Second child has come with joy. daughter Sharon, but Cheryl wanted a boy. Many years have passed. First grandson arrived at last. Cheryl, Daniel Peter's mother, was soon to bear another. Richard was born in 2 years' time, completing this happy family of mine. Name over the door changed to ICI, then EBC. First aid training was a hobby for me. Public and workforce where I did see. Training was needed with all men moving post. My first aid training put me foremost. I was used as a training officer with ICI. Time to retire, I say with a sigh. Part-time job now with training. Next 10 years with BTC. Did this nationwide for 10 years, training contractors and my peers. Sadly, Lorna became ill, needing me there. For the next 3 years, for her I did care. Sadly, the love of my life passed away after caring for 24 hours a day. I needed something to fill my day. I looked for an interest to fill my life. Chatham Island looked interesting. Took a couple of trips, time investing. Lynn intrigued me with the history. Became a tour guide, fascinating with the mystery. Then more involved, joined the committee before giving lectures to the local community. After dinner speaker was my game, then then the society chairperson I became. That's my life up to date. What else lies in store? Well, that's up to fate. Well, that's it.
Very good.
That's
Good night,
me,
all.
start to finish.
Good
These
night.
will be good for your
Hi,
grandchildren
David.
to
Good night, David.
Yeah, good night, David. Nice to see you. Get
Oh,
well.
Good night, Dave.
Yeah, good night.
Hope you feel better soon.
He just disappeared.
yeah.
Oh,
He said good night.
he said good night anyway.
He did.
Anyway, let's crack on, folks. I'm gonna grab my cup of tea. Thanks for that, Pete.
There you
Pete,
go.
Pete did the entertainment thing in the middle.
I don't know whether it was been entertaining.
Next
There's
week,
about 5
you're
bloody
gonna do a
pages of
song
it.
and dance.
I've got some really. I've managed to get some really sexy boots on eBay.
Hmm?
So yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, I will show you next week, hopefully. So I'm just going to get my tea and we're going to crack on. Right, here we go.
Oh,
There's my tea. There's my tea. Right, okay then, folks.
I didn't mention anything about archaeology Cymru, did I?
no, you didn't.
No, you're supposed to.
I'll have to add that on after.
I thought you already had.
I just got a Sarah's flat home.
All right. Well. Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm.
Okay. I thought actually to make it a bit more concise tonight and some images, we'll do Reading Condé next week. But we're going to look at we're just going to do a little bit of an overview of the environmental evidence that we find with Mesolithic sites. It mentions Starcar just a little bit. And it mentions a site in Berkshire. It mentions Somerset, the Somerset levels. And we also just mention about how important it is to understand some of these peat marshes that we actually find across Great Britain. And that's what I wanted to look at. But however, I wanted to chuck in something else into the mix tonight. Something that's been eking at me for quite some weeks, since we started doing the Mesolithic period. And I'm hoping that I can get to where I want it to be. There. Bingo. Now, this is an image of a wildfire. Now, I'm not going to say that we've got all the answers for the Mesolithic period, and that would be really wrong of me to say that we do. And there's a lot of loose ends that I've struggled to put together. So we go down this journey that there were trees everywhere in Britain. And somebody says, well, how do I know that? And we say, well, if you go to some of these, if you go to a lot of the peaty areas of our country and upland areas, you usually find lots of pollen evidence that takes us back thousands and thousands of years. And that pollen evidence indicates various different tree species that dominated the landscape. Okay. So then we struggle with the idea of how all the trees were felled. And then we think about along the coastal margins, the sea, the saline water killing the roots of the trees. But that doesn't explain all the other areas of Britain that are simply not affected by saltwater ingress, as we would call it. So then it got me thinking, is it possible to think of Britain being completely de-wooded, deforested by very small groups of people? Is it possible that when Britain became disconnected from Europe as an island 8,500 years ago, did the small numbers of people in Britain, were they all responsible for this mass de-woodistation, this mass deforestation? And then the question comes up again, was in fact Britain really all covered in such a dense woodland forest in the first place? And it comes back, yes, it probably was. So then I started thinking of this idea of wildfires. Now I lit a fire today, and it's near one of our gorse bushes, and the gorse bush is near nothing else. And I watched as the fire set light to this gorse bush, and I thought, right, is it? And the whole gorse bush did not set alight, and I thought, right, that's my experiment gone. And by the gorse bush setting alight, it'll grow new shoots and it'll bring new life into that bush, which is great. So I don't like killing things and so on, but I just wanted to look at that. And then I would like us to all think about, is it possible for a greenwood like Savanack forest? Well, they call it Savanack forest, but it's a woodland. Is it possible for Savanack to be set alight and for all the trees to go up in flames? Is that possible? What would it take for Savanack to go up in flames? And I wouldn't like that to happen. But if it's possible for large woodlands like Savanack to be set alight, then that might explain how lots of our landscape may have lost their trees. I'm going to leave that one there because it's a rather depressing concept, but I'd like us to come back and think about this and mull over it in the week, because we have some loose ends I am really struggling in the literature to fill. And it's almost as if when we look at the Mesolithic period, we gloss over it. So let's move on, folks. We don't need to, I don't want us to think about that when we go for questions. I want you to think about it throughout the week. So what I'd like to do now is we've got this really nice piece from the English Heritage website. And this is the site of Star Car. Now, we're not doing electron star car at all, because that's whole day, it's whole evening, yeah, to really get into it. So one of the biggest things that we're lucky with the Mesolithic period is that there's lots of peat around. There's places like the Somerset Levels that have preserved the archaeological landscape from the Mesolithic period, Neolithic period, and so on. And then eventually the whole landscape it becomes a marshy sort of landscape, and then eventually it drains and it dries out, and we lose the archaeology. But in many places still, we do find areas like this site, Starcar in North Yorkshire, where the archaeology is very well preserved still. And I would say that the Muss Farm site near Peterborough, I know that's only 3,000 years old, that peat and everything was really well preserved there, i.e. The Pompeii of the Bronze Age near Peterborough. We've mentioned that. So the most significant thing, we keep saying that there's loads of significant things about the Mesolithic period. We've mentioned of the woods. We've mentioned of the microliths, and we've got lots of environmental evidence as well. Starcar, probably best known, one of the best Mesolithic sites that we know of, although we've not done it yet. One thing that they're trying to abate is the draining of the landscape, so we can at least preserve some of the archaeology for future generations to examine and to understand. Let's go to another little image. And here we go. Now, you can see that sort of slightly drying out there. This again is another English heritage studied site. This is fascinating. It's in Berkshire. So the beating heart of southern England. It's in the Kennet Valley. And interestingly enough, it's in the Kennet Valley and along the south coastal margins, Hampshire and Berkshire and so on, where the ice is melting first. So we're getting evidence of not only Mesolithic evidence, what they're excavating in the soil there, but Paleolithic evidence as well. And terms of preservation of archaeology, we use the words high quality paleo environmental record of preserved archaeology at this site in the Kennet Valley. So this archaeological landscape, as they're excavating, they're from time to time sampling the archaeology and excavating it and trying to understand, will the archaeology survive if it all dries out? What does survive if it all dries out? All those things. And one of the key things with this archaeological excavation is to target and to understand as much as we possibly can if it dries out or not. And we could say, why don't we just excavate everything from the Mesolithic period? We can't. And in terms of if we go back to the previous image, lots of what we do see at Starcar, lots of this has already been excavated, may have been excavated in the 1930s. And as you can see, it's still there today. From time to time, what archaeologists do is uncover the archaeology, look at it, see if I can learn a bit more and cover it back up again. But what we do find is over time, the archaeology undoubtedly decays with each visit of the archaeologist and with each time that the landscape is drained. Sort of move on again. One of the very intriguing things about archaeology is to try and understand what we can record and what we can save and what we lose. archaeologists are in the very unfortunate position that we've got to make decisions about what we can and what we can't keep. So one of the most intriguing bits of our Mesolithic landscape is the Somerset Levels. And not only is the Somerset Levels known for its later archaeology, it's also known for its earlier archaeology as well. And there we go. It might not look like this type of landscape, which is a lot more peaty looking. But when we go, for example, to here, it looks like an everyday field. However, the Somerset Levels still contain large quantities of peat that have inevitably not really been drained to the degree that we've lost the archaeology completely. Some archaeological sites, all we've got left now instead of the wood is lithic artifacts. So one thing that we are doing in archaeology is sort of really understanding the Mesolithic period from its environmental signature, and obviously doing geophysics on this landscape, undertaking test pits, radiocarbon dating, getting an idea of sequences. And one of the key things that we really need to understand from this type of archaeological landscape is if we go back, and I really want to express this in terms of what it's saying here. In archaeology, we're inevitably obsessed with what we've created, right? Buildings and trackways and pottery and what have you, right? We're obsessed. But what we are starting to really understand is that we are not alone within that landscape. We're not alone within the landscape today. What we are really doing is looking at the paleo-environmental evidence. The paleo-environmental evidence, what does that mean? So we look at the animal remains from the past. We look at the plant remains from the past. We look at sediments, whether the soil was sandy or peaty or whatever. That's what paleo-environmental studies are. And again, not by looking at the individual sites alone, we look at all the other evidence and say, oh, actually, they built this settlement and it was beautiful, because there's evidence of these snails in the past, and these snails in the past tell us that there was lots of fresh water around and that the site was a really good place to live. The other thing as well is what we can really glean, and if we again sort of look out in fields, and this is actually in North Yorkshire, that one. This is in Surrey. What we can really understand, and something that I have been mentioning, is that did our ancestors understand the landscape that they lived in? Did they care for it? Did they live alongside it as much as the environment lived alongside them? What is going on? What impact did they have on this landscape? And in many ways, all those questions are really important to understanding their land use. Land use on this type of level and land use today is, so land use today, you would examine the potential risks to the archaeology, and how people in the past managed to live within the landscape as well. All these really things are really, really important. And one thing that examining these layers can do is to tell you what impact modern agricultural activities have within the landscape, right? So it's as simple as this. If in times in the past there were certain snails, there were certain bees, there were certain trees that lived within the landscape because of its peaty nature, right? Then you could say, oh, right, all these things exist because we've got these peat marshes, right? By draining the peat marshes, all these things are going to go. And this is what the past tells us. So again, it's understanding the deposits of the past as here excavating what's called the Sweet Track at Shatwick, Somerset Sweet Track. We've mentioned that before. It's a later set of archaeology, but then again, it's an important set of archaeology. A wooden trackway going across a prehistoric landscape, not necessarily Mesolithic, but bloody old. So again, if we go to here, here we go, Thursley Bog. They're trying to keep some of these bogs intact, and they're trying to keep some of these valley mires and these wetlands intact. For example, this one at Thursley Bog in Surrey, they're saying, well, we understand from the past that these bogs need to be here because they do certain things for the environment. And this is obviously learning from the archaeology to help us develop strategies for the future. And then finally today, as I said, I just wanted to sort of give a just little bit of an overview. Finally today, this is near the northeast Yorkshire coastline, the Mesolithic project. So, and obviously joining in with the moors, joining very much in with the landscape and the lakes and everything. And this is a lot to do with the English historic England work. And again, it's not just about finding flint, it's about building up the story. And one of the things that we're struggling with the Mesolithic period is that people have just been too obsessed with flints. And they've just been too obsessed with finding buildings, right? It's all good, but it's not, it's only telling us one part of this ancient landscape. What we need to do is understand all of this ancient landscape as much as possible. And what they're doing, because you can see today, today's been a bit of an overview, and next week we're going to be a lot more focused, right? And I've given you that question about fires as well. So one thing that we're really doing in archaeology is as I said, instead of just focusing on the flints and focusing on the timber, we're going back to some of these sites, like the site at Starcar, like the. Can everybody bear with me a second? Bear with me a second. Hang on. Hello. Right, I have to go soon, folks. But I was just about to say that this project in northeast Yorkshire, what archaeologists are trying to do, instead of focusing on the flint and the timber, like when you look at Starcar, what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the knowledge in the Mesolithic period by looking at everything, and to give us a new idea and a new perspective to what the Mesolithic was like, and very exciting from everything that we've already done so far. So on that note, right, I'm going to find out if there are any questions. Right, so Gina, anything you'd like to say, lovely?
Oh, thank you. Very interesting.
Right, okay, it's been a bit of an overview tonight. I just wanted to sort of, we had a technological problems, we've got some images back in the end. Anne, anything you'd like to say, darling?
Yeah, only, I mean, in listening to what you're telling me about this and reading this book about anthropology, which I'm doing, and seeing the different ways in there, that their neighbours had almost different cultures, how they did child rearing and that kind of thing, which we can't really know from archaeology. But then there have been things that came up in the archaeology that links to it. I found a whole lot connects pretty well. I'm really interested in it.
The other thing that you've said is that everything is really different and diverse, like modern day society.
Absolutely, yes.
Everything, yeah, in different ways. Hunter-gatherer, living
Yeah.
in one place,
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
living amongst the
And
trees.
not
Yes, it's so
only
diverse.
their food,
Yeah.
not only their food and the things we can find, but in reading this, the modern one about small bands that live in various places, how diverse their culture is, how they have different caring for their elderly or not, or I found it absolutely connects, and I've really quite found that interesting.
And its differences in one part of the coastline to another part, what those trees and everything. So this is the exciting thing with the Mesolithic period. It's just transition, it's movement, it's change, and this is what we're doing. Now you've got it. You've nailed it. Now we're in the right direction. Thank you, Andy. We're in the right direction. Thank you. Oh, well done. Oh, I feel really refreshed there, Pete.
Well, looking at you while you were on about the peat areas. Peat areas are slightly ericaceous, which is slightly acid. Some plants thrive in it, some plants don't like it at all. Which is why you see large areas of peat area where there are no trees growing.
But obviously, peat develops over a period of time, and it's sort of really invasive and so on. But obviously, what we're talking about is not what's living in amongst the peat, what's actually been deposited in it, and how the peat has then dominated the landscape. Yeah, so the new enemy now is not the trees. It's the trees having to deal with the peat and everything that the peat's taken away. But trapped and preserved in that peat is all that paleo-environmental evidence and the archaeology that we're excavating.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pete. Thank you. Margaret?
Well, it's not just trees in the woodland, it's all the stuff that's growing. I tried to get into a woodland the other day looking for interesting stuff, and it was neck high with nettles, ferns, weeds. It was impenetrable. So I presume all of those things would have been growing back then.
No, the difference is that it would have been animals in amongst that, and there would have been different species. It would have been trampled down, other things coming through. This is the problem with our modern look at the environment. We don't take account of all those other beasties that would have existed back there, that would have dealt with that environment that you're talking about. It would have been a completely different microcosm within everything that you've just mentioned.
I was just wondering how they communicated. If one group had gone off on a hunting spree, I wonder if they would have sent smoke signals, a bit like the Indians did. Set a fire.
They could have used mobile phones.
Signals. Pardon?
Or they could have just used mobile phones.
No, but I wonder if they did that.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing is, they were a bit more organized. They knew about the environment more than we did. They knew about the signs. They knew how to read the signs. They knew about wind directions. They knew about seasons better than us. They knew about movements of animals. They knew about the sun and how clouds would work and the mist. All these things that we've lost today. So that's all part of the communication. Those are the red flags of the past that we don't have today. I don't know if you've seen the Jurassic Park movie, and then suddenly all the animals disappear, and then there's all the birds flying towards you, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, it means we're going to be killed. Well, the thing is that I know that sounds nuts, but these people had more of an understanding of communication with the environment, not just verbal communication. These people knew. And this is the thing. So they are able to respond to that rather than having to be constantly in touch as we do with mobile phones.
Can I just ask you another thing? It might be a
silly question.
When did we first start eating meat?
Some humans would have eaten it millions of years ago. Others would have not eaten it. Some would have eaten both. It really depends what took your fancy.
But millions of years ago, we weren't on two legs. So which came first?
Some monkeys eat meat. Actually, no. You've missed the point of that lecture. That lecture was saying that some humans may have wanted to wander around on two, others may have wandered around on four, others may have eaten meat. It's all that mixture. And remember that mixture, exactly what Anne said. Nothing is in one direction. Right. Andy, anything from you, lovely? And Pat?
No, you've actually seemed to have covered all with the last few questions. Been good questions there. So I look forward to the next bit. Thank you.
Bloody hell, this is next week. We're going to be total right. And finally, Pat.
Oh well, thank you. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
right, that's it then. Oh, well, that was a squib. Okay then, folks. Well, well, that was really good tonight, and we're looking forward to next week. And next week, we're going to be. I've just looked at it in my diary. Next week, we're going to be looking at Staffin Island, and we will be looking at this site of Reddy-con-Dene in Yorkshire. So that's it.
What time tomorrow, Carol? Tomorrow afternoon?
Tomorrow morning is 11 o'clock, Pete.
11 o'clock. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Dare I come?
Yes, you can. It's good.
No, I said dare I.
Yeah, you should. She's a bit of a monster, I know. Okay.
Right.
Okay then. Well,
then.
Well, that's it then. If nobody's got any other questions, right? Pat answered that one. If nobody's got any questions, that was brilliant tonight. So Pat,
there's another small thing I'd like to mention. You said about whether they cared for the environment, the people, and I remember I had a copy once of, I think it was Chief Seattle's letter to the President of the United States, talking about and he wrote to him to say how the white man was destroying the environment.
Yeah.
And that the Indians worked with the environment, and he was complaining about that. And when you're saying, did they do that? Well, you wonder whether it was a continuum of that, because these Indians were much less civilized in inverted commas.
The thing is, they weren't aware of it. They just did it because they needed to. Otherwise, they wouldn't survive. That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. They weren't conscious of it.
It was a natural thing to do.
Yeah, it's not in their interest to destroy it. Yeah,
they had no interest. It was a logical thing to do. So we think illogically, it was logical. That's the point.
Yeah, they were part of nature, weren't they?
Exactly.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? At what point did we get it wrong then?
Nature and nurture, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh God, so many questions for next week. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought somebody else wanted. If nobody's got anything else they want to say, right? That was a brilliant one. That was good. So Pete, Anne, Drina, David, he's gone. Pat, Margaret, and Andy. I'll see you next week.
You will.
Bye all.
Thanks, Carl. Bye.
Bye. My pleasure. That was good. Bye. That was good. Take care.
Yeah. See you in the morning.
See you in the morning, Pete. Take care. I'll bring some eggs. Anyway, I've got to go. If you want some eggs, Pete, I'll bring some.
I'm okay at the moment.
All right then. Okay. Anyway, I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah.
Hi, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much. I'm going to look in the box, and here we go. Closed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very, very much.